Hello, welcome to the new episode of the Emo Social Club podcast.
What episode number are we even on anymore?
22, I think.
Ooh, we're feeling 22?
Yeah. Oh, God, I love Taylor Swift.
Oh, fuck, I forgot that patch in my other backpack for you.
God damn it. All my Taylor Swift merch and swag.
Yeah, so we keep getting random Taylor Swift leftover merch from all her past tours, just like 6 months to 8 months after the fact for some reason, and they just find it hidden in the corner. So I come into work, they're like, we have all this T-Swift gear. Do you want it? I'm like, where are we getting this from? Why do we have endless amount of T-Swift promo items?
Because you deserve it.
I really don't want it, so that's your benefit.
She is a queen.
So I have, like, the Bad Reputation tour, like, all of their...
Yes.
We have a bunch of their promo items that are, like, the high-price ones, and I'm like,
Yes.
well, we have them now.
Yes. Please give to me.
They're in my other backpack
Give
that I
me
don't
that
have
merch.
with me.
Well,
You can have a sick patch.
I want the sick patch.
Imagine, that's probably like a $25 patch.
Yeah. And I'm just getting it to show my support and my love, my appreciation.
Will you wear it on your jean jacket along with your T-Swift promo shirt I gave you?
I will wear the T-shirt. I don't really put patches on my jean denim jackets.
What are you, old?
I put like pins on them.
You're
I don't put
old.
patches. I should put like a big one on the back. If you have any like big Taylor Swift
No,
patches.
this one's pretty big. It's like a big oval.
Oh, okay.
So like
That's
you
not
could
bad.
put it, slap it on in the
Yeah.
middle, like
Yeah,
property.
yeah.
Like we can like go and like put Sharpie or like the fabric pens on there, but like property of, and then just
Oh
put
my
it straight in the
God. Oh my God.
really
Whatever you
DIY
need.
it.
Whatever she needs. We stan a queen. I never use that phrase because I sound fucking stupid when I do.
You do?
But I stand by my phrase. I've been watching too many Shane Dawson fucking YouTube
Because you're really
videos.
an 18-year-old college girl.
They're interesting in the way that they're just sensationalist bullshit, and you can just sit there and watch like an hour and a half video, just like zone out on it. Like, it's not very good. The conspiracy videos are not very good.
Obviously.
They are entertaining, I guess.
I want to know how then, because there's supposed to be a new YouTube algorithm coming out that makes it not suggest
It was
conspiracy
announced
theory
right
video.
before he announces his new, or he puts out his videos. He's like, "Wow, thanks." It's supposed to prevent you from going down rabbit holes of these conspiracy theories, because people have found that the more you're on you're on these conspiracy theories, the more often it promotes them to you. So it's promoting things like flat Earth and anti-vax and
Dumb shit.
eventually more dangerous shit. They've found that a lot.
I mean,
of people
anti-vax
get,
is pretty dangerous to begin with.
yeah, I've been listening to a podcast about the anti-vax movement and how it started out being super racist, and now it's just super dangerous and a little racist.
Well, and also it's like autistic.
It's it's
I mean, that's the
ableist
biggest thing.
and-
People are like, hey, guess what? I want my kid to be autistic rather than be dead. Like,
Yeah.
that's a little bit too metal, and I'm going to need you to, like, take it
also-
down a lot.
It's also like people are straight benefiting from it monetarily, and that's, of course, how everything works. If you can find a movement like Flat Earth or anti-vax that makes you money, then you will continue to do that because it makes you money. And somehow, some way, we have to stop people from making money from that.
I saw some Flat Earth stamps and graffiti over in Lakeview right before the new year. Yeah, it was, like, just right on the sidewalk. Like, on the sidewalk, like, walking towards, like, the Belmont Red Line.
Maybe it was a way of measuring. Like, you're down the street and you're like, I can still see the graffiti. The earth is flat. Like, it shouldn't
It's a way to prove my point.
Welcome, Peter. We got some spicy takes. No, we're just talking about how conspiracy videos tend to radicalize people.
That is a spicy take for some people.
It is, because people who
Republicans.
want you to get down those rabbit holes are upset when you are no longer allowed to go down the rabbit holes because the algorithm doesn't benefit it. But also, it's some dangerous nonsense. So,
You want to know another spicy take?
That's what happens when we stream.
This is
like
a local spicy
we
take.
just get into spicy takes for no reason.
So, right before I came over, I decided to go get Dimo's. And I got a mac and cheese pizza because I love mac and cheese pizza.
Yeah, correct.
And I was eating it, and I messaged my friends in our group chat, and I was like, listen, you know that Big G's pizza place over by Metro? They have better mac and cheese pizza than Dimo's.
I stand by that, though, too.
Okay, good.
That's true. That's just a real fact.
So, yeah. We didn't even remember the name of that place that was by Metro because we just gone there. We're like, hey, there's pizza right there before we hop on the red line. We don't have to walk to the opposite side of Wrigley.
Dude, mac and cheese pizza is so good.
I guess some, locals might be pissed at this later, but whatever.
Like, okay, first of all, we have, it sounds like thebomb.com. We have a wealth of pizza in Chicago of all different kinds. And the fact there are two places that offer mac and cheese pizza just means that they can compete and get better.
Exactly. Except when I was really, I was very much harassed and bullied on a 2.5 traffic car ride home from an event by my coworkers because I said I was really craving some Pizza Hut and Little Caesars, and then they yelled at me because they were like, "That's not true Chicago pizza." I'm like, "I live in the suburbs."
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Yeah, Crazy Bread. I fuck with
good.
that.
It's just good.
And
Sometimes you just
like,
want a $5 pizza,
right? And like some Crazy Bread.
Yeah.
Like, and or maybe my sister got the pretzel pizza.
Yeah.
She ate the whole thing by herself.
Yeah. Sometimes
she's
that's
one of
what
those
you want.
like those really like I don't know where she puts it because she's like only like 100 pounds.
Right. I hope that nothing bad ever happens to her.
I know, right?
Nothing will change in that.
She also streams on Twitch sometimes.
Well, fucking shout us out.
I don't know.
Host us.
Her gamer name.
Host our channel. So here's an episode of the Emo Social Club podcast, all about pizza again.
We're back together.
That's
even
all
though
about
I'm
food.
still sick. I've been sick for a whole ass month.
But I've allowed Lizzie to be in the room with me, which means I'll probably get sick now.
I'm not contagious, I swear.
Catch you again in March.
The pneumonia's gone.
Jesus Christ.
That was just a sinus infection.
Great.
No problem.
No problem. So here we are. We're back in the actual same room. We are streaming. Video is working this time.
Love it.
According to all of my information in front of me, that the video is working. This will also be on YouTube, hopefully.
Cool.
You can check out the video at our YouTube channel, Emo Social Club, on all the socials.
Except on Twitter, it's X Emo Social Club X.
X Emo Social Club X on Twitter.
We're still really trying to fight this person who has the original Emo Social Club handle.
Yeah,
I
you
swear
just
to God.
I just send just threatening ats, just like give us the thing,
You
or
coward.
I will send you a strongly worded email.
I'll have my lawyer draft up.
Oh, I'll find someone with a light grasp knowledge of the law, and I will send you.
I have a friend in law school. I can hit him up.
I will ask you to follow me back so that I may DM you. Because I can't send a DM unless you follow each other. We are not mutuals. Correct, Emo Social Club. We meant to do the X Emo Social Club X to be edgy and emo, but then it's like, well,
we had no other
also
option.
we want the correct one.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just like,
we want consistency across all media platforms because when you explain it to people and they're not in this scene, it's even more cringy. So when you explain it to a normie or an indie kid, they're like, don't like that.
First of all, having to explain something to an indie kid is already rude.
I work with a lot of them.
God damn it. Lizzie.
Brian.
A continuation from our previous episode. Have you watched The Umbrella Academy?
What time do I have?
What time do you have?
I don't have. I still haven't finished Castlevania. It's
well,
been
that
since
wasn't
October.
the question. The question was, you can come back to anime later.
It's not anime.
You can come back to cartoons later. All
yeah,
right.
it's cartoons. None of this makes it sound any better.
Yeah, it's really helpful. So no, you haven't.
No, my coworker asked.
sick.
I still been working.
Fine.
Just because you're sick doesn't mean you stop working. Maybe maybe that's actually just for me.
Some people get sick days.
I still work.
All right.
I still have to go to school. If
True.
I miss three classes, they immediately fail me.
Oh my God, this is why so many people are sick. It's because you can't get out of
It's
school
the
for a
educational
day.
system.
Yeah.
I used my one excused absence in my Monday night class, and she didn't count it as a excuse like it was supposed to be because I gave her a whole ass doctor's note. She said, no, this is unexcused, so the next one you're going to lose 10% of your grade. It's like, excuse me, ma'am.
Literally, excuse me.
Literally. As she marks me off 3 extra points for not using a large enough font on my website that she didn't mention about changing.
Peter says,
so really salty. I'm so fucking salty.
Peter says, Umbrella Academy is amazing and worth binge watching. I agree. I just finished it last night. I felt very strongly about the show overall. I wanted to get your hot, spicy takes because you are a comic book reader, so you would have some experience in that way. And here we are with nothing to talk about on the damn podcast.
No, we have other things to talk about, like localized news.
Yeah, that's why I want to talk about it.
I'll eventually watch Umbrella Academy when I have the time. Also, because my coworker asked me, then he was like, I didn't realize Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance wrote it.
Oh, of My Chemical Romance.
And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? It's only been out for how many years?
12.
Right, yeah. I was like, it was a graphic novel. He's like, I didn't read it. I'm like, well, you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Because I'm about to tell you how it's about to go down when I watch it and I compare it.
This is how it ends.
And then he started trying to talk Watchmen with me. I'm like, I wrote a rhetorical criticism that was 27 pages on Watchmen.
We're not getting that into this again. Peter says, I haven't finished it yet, unfortunately, because people end up trying to watch it with me and then I can't binge it. I know. I started with my girlfriend, and then the other night she wasn't feeling well, and so we didn't get to finish it. And I was like, listen, I feel for you. Like, I'm sorry that you feel this way, but like, get your shit together. I'm trying to finish Umbrella Academy. Granted,
I did that with one of my best friends. I've been trying to finish season 4 Black Mirror since September.
Oh my God.
Because we haven't been able to hang out.
Yeah. You just need to finish it. Just go. You got your own Netflix account.
I did Bandersnatch all on my own with another friend anyway. I just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it.
And because I don't have the right TV to do it on still. Actually, her TV does it. I'm thinking we're just going to get into that now.
Looks like Apple TVs have issues.
Apple TV is fine.
Whatever.
Just the remote controls apparently don't work. So I wanted to start us off talking a bit about Umbrella Academy because we're going to get into probably something that is not super like, it just seems like no one is really interested in this, but I think that people need to be made more aware of things about it. So that is the local Chicago elections coming up next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, the 26th.
The 26th of February are the local Chicago elections. We are voting on mayor, aldermen, treasurer. So a bunch of things are coming up that we seem to just sort of forget about in the news, because news is very national. It's supposed to appeal to everybody. So I think that we get a lot more information about national politics, and now obviously people are talking about the 2020 race and who's running for that, and we're not having the conversation about who's running
on a localized level.
Yeah, and all in all, that's what's really going to affect people way more than anything else that's happening nationally, which is still there are things that need to happen that will affect people's lives. Medicare for all and the Green New Deal and things that we're talking about, which are great, but Chicago, being that we both, well, I live in Chicago. You don't live here yet, but you live in the neighboring suburbs.
I'm here most of my life.
Yeah, it does affect you. Obviously, it affects people who take CTA, who drive into the city, who take any public transit, who works minimum wage jobs, who want to live here, who go to school here, who
know people who's here.
And it's a big city. It's the 3rd largest city in the United States. So it's worth looking into how this is going to affect not only the people who live here and also the people who live in the neighboring suburbs as well. So
it's also one of the most corrupt states.
Also that.
Let's just put that out there too.
Also
we are aware of how corrupt this state and city is.
It's also, Illinois is one of the states in the United States that most people are moving out of, whether it's due to corruption or just the crazy fucking cold weather. Trying to get out to all the warmer states before they're all buried by the sea.
Yeah, they get disconnected and they drift off and then sink like Atlantis.
Yeah.
Bye, Florida.
Fucking, that's fine.
Yeah, honestly. Except for Disney World.
Sure, there's Disneyland, I guess.
It's not the same.
I know. But I'm not going to come to this podcast and say that either one of us are experts on Chicago elections.
We know the baseline of it, and we should know more. But again, I also know more about my area in DuPage County, about who's running for that, and like in that my town as well. because I live in that town.
Yeah.
So I know more.
Fair.
And I've had to cover it before for local election coverage anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm more
Lizzie's
versed
journalistic
in,
integrity.
Yes. I'm more versed in Western suburban politics.
Great.
But I know basic Chicago
If we weren't getting
politics.
if we weren't already getting super niche, we're now getting even super niche.
Super niche?
Yeah. Super nicheer.
Love it.
Dude, thanks for stopping by, Peter. We'll check you out later. This episode will go up tomorrow, and your name will be in it.
Love it.
Because I'm just going to fucking rip it and post it. So, yeah, but thanks for stopping by. So since we're not experts on this, and you won't even necessarily have to learn this because you won't be voting necessarily in this election.
Or if you're in Chicago, you do.
Yeah, I think that it would be good for us to get some information out, try to push some people into actually getting involved in local politics. We've had guests like Ariel and Maria from Black Lives Matter come on to talk about how local Chicago politics affects their community and how the communities overlap. I do think that there is definitely some overlap between the emo community, the community that wants to relive their sad days, and also a community that wants to go out and get involved in this and change some things. I think that people have become a lot more politically active since the 2016 election and since Trump was elected, and now we have an opportunity afforded to us to say, okay, cool, you want to be involved, you want to be part of the change, here you go. You can be part of it in your local community. It will affect people you know. It will affect your life. Let's go ahead and do it. So this is kind of, I think, me putting my money where my mouth is a little bit, saying that I want to get involved and actually doing something to get involved, and hopefully trying to push people who listen to our podcast, if you are in Chicago or you're somewhere else even.
And you have your local elections going on, go research them better than we have.
Oh, I mean, look, we put out on Twitter, we put out on Instagram that we wanted people to send us who they were voting for and to get involved. And I mean, I don't think that our audience is necessarily like huge. I don't think that we have like this giant reach
National
of people.
range.
Yeah, and people may not necessarily like respond to everything that we post, but I do think there was something to be said that we didn't get a lot of respondents, and that we as ourselves don't necessarily know a bunch about it. And I think that it's just not as interesting. It's not as glitzy and glamorous as all the stuff that's going on. Yeah, like there's something entertaining and there's something very like Game of Thronesy about the national election. Like people want to see all of these dynasties and who's doing what and who's fucking over everybody else, and that's not really always Chicago politics.
Well, I mean, you do have a dynasty legacy coming in with like Daley and everything.
Yeah.
So we do have that to an extent.
It's also that Chicago is very much a Democratic city, so you're working within the Democratic Party still. There's just people that are from different sides of one party. It's not one side versus another side.
The Democratic line, basically. It's like, am I more libertarian? Am I more Democratic socialist? Am I more like secretly Republican? But I don't want to say it. I have conservative economic values, but I'm socially liberal.
Yeah.
No, shut the fuck up. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, shut up, Howard Schultz. Fuck that guy. So
honestly,
I'm still drinking coffee, but fuck you.
I only drink it because people give me gift cards. Otherwise, or I go to my friends who still work at Starbucks and like hit me up.
Listen, we don't have to justify why we still drink Starbucks, even though the former CEO is a turd. Like that's not our. Did you know? That's not our job here.
If you blend a birthday cake pop, which you can't do unless you actually worked at Starbucks, into a frappuccino. I know vanilla bean. It tastes really good.
This is former Starbucks employee, like,
I have a whole black apron to prove it.
Jesus.
And many
I had to get mine back,
ones.
so.
You had a black apron?
No, I had a green one, but they forced me to give it back.
Basic.
I didn't give a shit about working at Starbucks. I was working for minimum wage.
I mean, I gave too much of a shit.
Minimum wage, $15. So
right, but remember that $15 is only going to increase after 5 years.
I know.
And it's already been implemented at least for Chicago for the last year and a half, 2 years. So the rest of Illinois is finally catching up. Illinois is currently stuck at $8.25 an hour as minimum wage, and some places still pay it. My undergraduate college paid their student workers $8.25 an hour. Yeah.
All right.
I'm so salty.
Listen, I now work for a place that offers more. I think
I'm proud of you. You're moving that up in the world.
I've moved up a long time ago when I quit fucking Starbucks. So I
That's
wanted
all
to
of
find
us.
a way for us to get some more information about the candidates, and there's this quiz online. We will link it below. This is from radio station 91.5 WBEZ.
NPR?
Is
The
it?
NPR affiliate.
It is an NPR affiliate. I didn't see that on this exact page, but sure.
It's just local
Yeah,
knowledge.
Lizzie, of course, I should have just asked you about radio
Been trying
stations.
to get into NPR for a while now.
Mm.
What's up? Hit me
Well,
up.
yeah, we are now spreading your information on our podcast. So if you ever need
I'm
any
very
support
capable.
at your radio
I'm
station,
very capable at podcasting.
Lizzie has the experience, and I have the interest, I guess. I don't know. I was like talking
He
into a
likes to be the
microphone.
pretty boy face.
Sure.
I'll do the rest.
Pretty-ish boy face.
Old man face.
So it's a quiz that is addressing some of the issues that are likely to be on voters' minds. I didn't know some of these things were happening, so I took this quiz the other day and I got an answer, and I've completely forgotten it since I took it. I've also heard some things about other candidates that I would think that I'd probably align myself with more than the results I got. So we'll go a bit through some of these things at the end. I'll take the quiz and we'll just see how I line up, since I'll be the one voting in the Chicago election. So this is just our way of trying to get people to have more information about a subject, and we might dive into those subjects a little bit more as we go through this quiz. So the link will be down below in whatever you're watching this on or listening to it on. You'll be able to find the information there. If you live in Chicago and you're interested in finding out more about the election, I would suggest this to be just like a interactive, quick way of getting some information to be at least a semi-informed voter, and definitely take the opportunity to go vote. You should have all that information already. If you don't, quit being
You should have already gotten like millions of pamphlets.
stop being a goober and just do your
goober.
job. Do your
Goober.
civic duty of living in this city. Okay. Question number 1.
Ooh.
Do you want the next mayor to raise fees on ride shares like Uber and Lyft to fund CTA improvements?
Well, here's the thing. If you have a lot of people that I know live in the city, but they don't have vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So they rely on all forms of public transportation. So it's kind of like a tit for tat. It's like, well, one thing I ride all the time is going to be improved, but the other thing I ride all the time is going to really fuck me over. So it's kind of like it's like a lose-lose, win-win at the same time.
So I don't know if it's just the way this question is worded. There's a link here. I'll go to it just to see a little bit more about this info, which links to a Chicago Tribune article about considering the aldermen are considering capping the number of rideshare vehicles. And I don't know if you as a listener know who Ed Burke is, but if you see Ed Burke's name in something, it's probably some fucking bullshit. So of course his name is in the second fucking paragraph on
Love
here,
it.
and I'm like, no, this is probably trash. So I take the CTA to work every day. I will also say that I have been to multiple countries and taken public transit in different places around the world and experienced it in good places, in okay places, and pretty much everywhere across the world. Like, the public transit is a lot better, and they may or may not have rideshare functions, but I do believe from my experience in these places that your country should be judged on the way that you allow people to get around. There's a lot of issues in underprivileged communities of access to public transit, of access to owning a car if you can't afford it, access to riding a bike anywhere. Like, you don't really have these options. I think that the CTA does need to be improved, but I also think that the idea of taking money from another form of transportation to pay for that is not the right way.
Especially when so many of the same people who would benefit from the CTA improvement are the ones taking the ride share. So it's pretty much them overpaying in a sense for it.
I've also, there's been some interviews with Uber, or not Uber so much, but Lyft. The couple of people from Lyft were interviewed about the statistics that Lyft has been pulling, and Uber and Lyft, I believe, both of them together, just ride shares, are 1% of the market share of cars driving or any transportation in the United States. If that's even 1% of what Chicago is, this isn't a great format to get people to pay for things. Most countries actually have a tax on cars in cities. So, for example, most Nordic countries, which I lived in Sweden, I went to a couple cities in Sweden multiple times. There was one time where I drove into a city called Gothenburg, where, if you want to know some quick emo trivia about Gothenburg, that is where Bring Me the Horizon recorded their Sempiternal album. So there you go. I've connected this back to some fucking emo music. So they have a tax that if you drive a vehicle into a populated city, that you pay extra, like a toll just to enter the city with your car. It doesn't mean you can't drive around the country, and obviously these countries are much smaller than the United States. I'd compare, Sweden to a smaller state in the United States. But if you drive into the populated cities there, you pay a tax for driving that car, and this is a way of reducing carbon emissions. It's a way of reducing that, so it's helpful for the environment. It reduces just general traffic and general clusters of cars in the city. It also helps them fund all of the transit, so buses and trains, bike shares, which are really popular in Europe before they came over here. So this is just sort of like a way that other countries have thought of solving this issue. I feel very strongly about CTA in Chicago because I use it every day, but also because I know how much better it could be. So the idea of like taxing what is one format of transit that doesn't add to congestion, that doesn't add to cars on the road, that doesn't add to I think that there's better ways of solving the issue by reducing the amount of cars on the road, and that's essentially what Lyft and what Uber would like to do overall, is reduce the amount of cars that need to be on the road, because this is such a major issue in so many cities across the United States that isn't being solved by the public transit options that all of them have. Every other city across the world, the prime example of how good it can be is Japan and even South Korea, is that their trains are constant. They run on time constantly. They send apology letters to the population of their country when their train is seconds late. And I don't mean like 30 seconds. I mean like 10 seconds late. Like, they run so on the clock and so consistently with very little malfunctions because they invest a lot in this, and it spans the majority of, let's say, Tokyo. It goes all over Tokyo. You can take transit everywhere. You do not need to own a car in one of the largest cities in the world. The idea that we think that this can't also happen in the United States is just so fucking strange. Like, we have this concept that we cannot have that.
That's a culture thing. That's a cultural thing. Because obviously, if you look at like Japan and South Korea, they're a completely different type of culture, especially when it comes to time. Where here, it's back and forth. There's so many different variables when it comes to it. Because if you go to like the southern part of the states, it's very like, I'll get there when I get there.
Yeah.
And up here, we're very like, we have to be out like 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early, whatever it is. You never see people who are like exactly right on the dot unless it's like accidental.
It's like, I mean, we can go into a much longer conversation about how we built America around roads and cars rather than building our transportation system around the people who live there. A lot of European countries were not built when there were cars. They were built before cars were invented. So their cities are, hello, Saif. Welcome to the stream. We're talking about transportation. It's a really interesting stream today. So these were cities that were built in order to allow people to walk or to take a bike everywhere, and Chicago is not. Chicago is not necessarily a good biking city that people can just grab a bike share and go wherever they want and get across the city, because the city is much larger spatially
It's spread
without options. There's the last mile problem of getting a bike or a scooter to where you take the CTA somewhere, but you still have to get from the CTA to where you actually are going, unless you work down in the Loop or if you work somewhere else. So you're like
right.
you're
in an area where you know that there's going to be a lot of population for work or living.
Yeah. So I feel like we're gonna spend a lot of time on this. I've also thought to myself, there's a lot of local politicians. We heard this a lot in the midterms about I forget her name. She's a trans woman who was elected to state representative position, and she literally ran on I want to fix the streets in my community, and won because she ran on a single issue of I want to improve something that affects the lives of the people that I know. And people were like, yeah, that's all we want. All we want is someone who fixes this. It's one thing, but it fixes so much around what we do on a daily basis that this is the kind of person we want to elect. So if I ever, if I just get bored and I'm like, all right, it's time, I'm going to just fucking run for office. I would run on a single platform of just I want to fix public transit. I want to fix it so that it fixes just a bunch of other issues, but I want to just be a single ticket person of just the major thing that I would run on is fixing transit. If I ever end up doing it, who the fuck knows what the future holds ever, but if I ever ended up doing it, I'd be no, straight up, it's about we're fixing transit. So I have a lot of information about this specific issue, but what's emo? Oh, jeez.
Oh, no.
Sorry. So Saif asked, may I ask you about what's emo? What are they? So in the context of what we're doing here on Emo Social Club Podcast, let me try to connect this both. So we are a podcast about emo music, which is, let's say, bands like My Chemical Romance or Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco. And we are trying to bring that community of music together with our local community in Chicago, with issues that affect that community. So whatever's in the news. Oh, it's fine. That's out of the subject. I'll jump in and answer it now since you're asking. We're just trying to connect those two things of our music community and our social community around that music to what is actually affecting people that we know and affecting the different unheard communities around that.
Basically, we saw that there was a need to actually address and sometimes even call out people for not being socially proactive and to also go out of their single issue platform. Maybe that they only know one thing. In the emo community, a lot of people know a lot about suicide education prevention, which is great, but they don't know much about healthcare reform and Medicare or their local elections, which is equally just as important.
Yeah.
So we created this to kind of talk about that and talk about more hard news subjects that could connect to the community and try to make it relevant to the community by intermingling the culture that we know.
Yeah. So that's why we're talking about politics and local Chicago politics on this episode. Normally we talk about music and TV and entertainment news, but this is just something that's coming up next week, so we want to make sure that we're giving that information out. I don't really mind that it's sort of off topic because it's also I want to keep reminding anybody who's listening to this episode, yes, I know, we're talking about some shit that doesn't sound that interesting on the top,
it's okay.
But also it's really
there's more to come. So
there's a lot more to come. Yeah.
The next one is
I want to at least answer this question about the CTA, but I'm going to stop talking about it. But I would say no, I do not think that we should raise fees on ride shares. I think that there's a better way to find income to make CTA improvements. So my answer is no.
So there's a yes or no and can't answer yes or no.
Yeah.
Just so you're aware of what our options are. There's no right and answer.
Yeah.
So the next one is Chicagoans are not currently allowed to make anonymous complaints against police officers. Should the next mayor work to change that policy? And we all know how notorious our Chicago PD are.
Oh.
Over the last decade?
Have they done anything that's been in the national news as of late? So I think this is a pretty easy answer for us to make. I do believe that. first of all, you should be allowed to make complaints about the police. If you want to make them anonymously, that's the only way to have a good way of speaking up against them. Then it's
accountability.
It's accountability. We should allow it. So I do believe that the mayor should change the policy of making anonymous complaints against police officers.
If we can make anonymous complaints and tips against people who commit crimes, and we've seen, especially in this past few months, like Van Dyke, how that was wholly covered up, and then how he pretty much got off with a slap on the wrist with everything that he done to Laquan McDonald. And I think it's beneficial because there's not always going to be the truth that comes out of it. So.
Yeah, agreed. So that one was much shorter than the CTA improvement one.
Yeah, it was.
Should the next mayor work to hire more police detectives? This is question number 3. Should the next mayor work to hire more police detectives to reduce violence and increase Chicago's low homicide clearance rate? We interviewed Ariel and Maria of Black Lives Matter, and I believe that most people, especially in minority communities and underserved communities, would agree that the solution is not more police officers.
Well, we also have to remember police officers, police detectives are 2 different classifications within the police force.
Okay.
Police officers are ones who are actually at the front lines. Police detectives come in after the fact.
Gotcha.
So that's where it differs.
So then, because I am not aware of this, so I'm going to click on this article and read more.
This handy-dandy link.
I am always going to be very willing to find out more about a subject that I don't know enough on. I will always admit when I'm wrong, and I feel very comfortable doing that.
There's nothing bad in doing that, by the way, general public. It's really good to do it.
It
because
is okay.
if you're just going to yell and complain about something and not be educated on it, then you kind of look like a fool.
It is okay to say, I don't know. Stand by it.
Especially if it's after the fact and you were proven wrong. Just be like,
Yep.
okay, I was wrong.
I love being proven wrong because then I learned something. So Chicago's homicide rate is at a historic low. This is actually from a couple years ago, this article. But it's my understanding, according to this, that the homicide rate is lower than it has been. I guess from the wording of hiring more police, I have concerns because I do believe
obviously.
that
They work together. They work jointly at the end of the day.
I believe, again, that the solution is not to police communities more or to try to harm these certain communities with more police intervention and police interaction. I do believe that it's more about prevention rather than whatever you say, persecution or however you want to put it, but it's about spending more time ahead of all of these crimes being committed. I do believe that the homicide rate, being low is good. I agree with it. I guess I don't necessarily know enough about what a police detective would benefit to reduce violence and increase Chicago's low homicide clearance rate. I just don't necessarily know how hiring more police officers, if we're already on this rate.
If we're already on this decline, is it really going to matter if we hire 5 to 25 to 50 more per area? And to think about that's a lot of money. That's also a lot of taxpayer money.
Yeah.
That's going to be allocated to police, where people rather have it allocated to literally anything else.
And I mean, the way that data works is not that necessarily because you have more means that it is going to improve exponentially. So let's say we have 10 police detectives right now and the homicide rate drops to the lowest it's been. Well, does that mean that hiring 10 more will have the amount of what it is, or is there other factors that have caused that decline in the homicide rate? And I don't know if that's necessarily. I mean, maybe this question is just simple and my brain wants to find all of the pieces of the puzzle there. But in my mind, I would say no, because I do not believe that that's how it works. We are only streaming on Twitch right now. This will be posted as a YouTube video, though, on our YouTube channel, which is Emo Social Club.
Yes.
Yeah. So that'd be my thought. I don't know if you have any corrections for what I'm saying.
It's pretty similar because the only thing that I could add on is police detectives, once they come in after the fact, after whatever crime or homicide is committed, what they're going to do is try to find whomever did it and then try to, trial and sentence them. But again, it also comes down to the fact of, are we actually putting people who deserve to be put away, or are we putting in people who are trying to meet a certain quota? Or is it because of other underlying factors like racism, for example, that we've seen is heavily populated in our Chicago PD?
Yes, it's an issue.
So it's kind of like you're put in the middle of what do you really think? And I feel like this should be an easy, like, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree. But I think because there's so many nuanced events and instances that have gone on in the past decade, it's hard to be confident in saying yes or no.
Yeah. No is the answer I'm putting for that one. Okay.
Look at you.
Look at me, getting through it.
All right, 4 out of 19.
Yeah, here, you read it.
Do you want the next mayor to work to hire social workers to respond to police calls involving mental health episodes?
This sounds like a yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in the past, too, how officers will, do well-being checks, and people who, are maybe mentally unstable, they get violent because they have an illness and they can't control it. Maybe they're not taking their meds, maybe they ran out of meds, or maybe they're triggered by something, and then they end up shooting and killing them.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard enough stories like that, and you would assume that the issue is because people don't know how to de-escalate a situation, or because I heard like a very strange report, and actually this goes back to the whole anti-vax thing. So as it turns out is that anti-vaxxers will say, well, the rate of autism is increasing in this country, and it's because of vaccinations, and that's
a lie.
It's
that's
non-correlative information. The truth is that a lot of minority communities do not have the money to go to get diagnosed for mental health issues. So autism was finally starting to be diagnosed more in minority communities, which caused the rates to skyrocket. It's not because people didn't have autism before. It's because people had autism and were not diagnosed with it.
Well, it's also recognizing that there's a spectrum of autism that, it's only come about in like the last 10 to 15 years, and people can realize, there's Asperger's, and then there's other different forms of autism that range from, highly adaptable to traditional society, and people who need that extra assistance because they aren't able to do it on their own.
Yeah.
So it's also acknowledging that, like, people who have Asperger's, people just typically think, like, that kid's just really fucking weird. But
just
like,
think
no, that kid has Asperger's.
It's
like,
just
leave him
Sheldon.
alone.
It's just fucking Sheldon. I mean, it is, but also, yeah. So in my mind, like, there needs to be more of an emphasis on mental health when it comes to policing, because it's not necessarily something that everyone is able to have diagnosed. It's not necessarily something that everybody is able to address. You may not know that you have mental health issues, and then a police is at your door, and you're not, your child or your family member is undiagnosed.
Fight or flight. Sometimes people are in certain, episodes, and their main thing is fight or flight, and what they're going to do most of the times for some people is fight.
Yeah, but as the peacekeepers, as law people, you need to be keeping the situation de-escalated to where you can handle it and have a nonviolent resolution, is my overall belief of everything.
I will say I went to my undergrad with somebody who, he was only getting a bachelor's because Chicago PD apparently requires you to have at least a bachelor degree to join the force. So he got a bachelor's degree in broadcast, but he really wanted to be Chicago PD. And he lives on, like, the south end of Chicago. And he pretty much said, like, they train you to just shoot and ask questions later, figure it out later.
Yeah.
Which, don't fucking do
that. It
that.
just isn't right. I mean, yeah, that's why we have an issue. I mean, I would love it. I would say that from my opinion, I would love to believe more in the police department and police officers. I, of course, am a straight white man, so my experience with them has either been non-existent or good. If I get into a traffic incident or something like that, like, obviously I'm having a different interaction than someone else of a different community would, and I am aware of that. But in this case, I do believe that if the situations in Chicago that we tend to hear about in the news are police officers having a terrible interaction in minority communities and overwhelmingly affecting minority communities, then it seems worth it to me to at least add to the force a person who's trained to handle different issues like mental health, and especially to be involved when responding to those issues or seeing those issues out in the communities. So I'm going to say yes. As I said in the previous thing, I'm not necessarily for hiring more police officers to solve issues, but I am for...
well, remember, this is a social worker. So somebody who has been significantly trained in how to handle, these people who have these mental illnesses and who are in this situation.
Yeah, I think that is... I think that's the correct method, at least, if we are hiring people to work with the police that are benefiting the force in different capacities. So, question number 5. We are just rocketing through these 19 questions in this most exciting of episodes. It's fine.
We can always speed through if we really feel the need.
If we, when I get to about an hour on this, it's going to be like, fuck it, let's just get it done. No, I'm kidding. Number 5. Should the next mayor lobby state legislators to allow a city-run casino in Chicago? The answer I have may surprise you, because I looked into this one a little bit. So apparently there's been some issues with getting the rights to have a city-run casino in Chicago. This is something that people have wanted to do, and there's been a lot of legality around it and issues with it. I've been to a lot of places in this world.
Yes, you have.
Not a lot of places necessarily have legalized gambling. Japan, for example, you cannot gamble legally anywhere in Tokyo. They have pachinko, which is just a game. You don't win anything from it, but people go and they spend money to play it, but you don't actually win anything. And you hang out like it's a casino, but it's not actually a casino. I haven't actually been in one. That's just my understanding of it. But there is no gambling in that way. On the other end, you have cities, let's say like New Orleans, which I've been to a couple times, and there's a large casino right in the middle there, or you have Vegas, where the majority of the industry is gambling. And then most of those places do have more freedoms around that. For example, both cities you can drink on the street in. Chicago, I've come to understand this is a law in Chicago where industries do not want you drinking on the street, not because of crime or just sort of that sort of attitude around it. It's more just because they don't want to lose the money going into the bars or money going into places. They want the money from that, and so bars and restaurant corporations say, no, we don't want any of that sort of shit. That's my roundabout way of saying I kind of think that there should be a casino because it does increase revenue to the city. The city has revenue coming in from that. I do believe that it would not be a direct improvement over things, and I don't know necessarily Chicago does a great job of doing good things with the money. So the revenue, we obviously have an issue where the revenue coming into Chicago doesn't necessarily get used in the best ways, and it doesn't get budgeted correctly, and it doesn't go for the things that we need to be spending the money on. So the idea of increasing revenue and then using it inappropriately seems counterintuitive, though I do believe that overall there would be a net gain from having a city-run casino in Chicago.
I've never thought about a casino in the city.
I know.
Ever.
I read this question. I looked into it, and I was like, I've never even fucking thought of this. But you think I'm trying to think of other major cities like Chicago that would have a casino in it, and I can't think of many. My hometown of Des Plaines got a casino right before I moved to the city when I got out of college. As far as I know, there was a big battle between whether it would be in Des Plaines or Rosemont, and it's kind of basically on the border. They wanted it near O'Hare, and it was a thing of trying to get that revenue there. And as far as I know, Des Plaines has gotten a much better revenue from having the casino there. Des Plaines made a lot of improvements since I left. God damn it. We got the first Starbucks after I fucking left.
Ooh.
Yeah, Jesus. I'm so I mean that's the most experience that I have with a town or a city of some sort getting a casino in it and saying, okay, great, we're making more revenue. I do think it would benefit Chicago in that way. I looked through this before when I took this quiz and saw that a lot of people were for it, even the people that you'd think like weren't going to be for that sort of thing. So I'm going to say yes as a thing. I don't know if this is the
best or most important.
Yeah, I think that having more money coming into the city to be able to do more things with it is a net good. I just don't know. It depends on who we elect to say you're going to use it for the right things, or who is in charge of these. When the money comes in, who's in charge of spending it, who's in charge of budgeting it. Which we'll get to treasurer, which I 100% know who I'm voting for treasurer. So that's going to be way easier. It's literally just mayor that there's like 2,015 people running, and I need to figure out who to vote for that. So I am saying yes. There should be the next mayor should lobby state legislators to allow a city-run casino in Chicago. Question number 6.
All right. Do you want the next mayor to support a tax on financial transactions conducted by asset exchanges in Chicago, such as the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the CBOE?
If you're listening to this while driving, I would ask that you wake up. You're behind the wheel right now, and please be careful. You're on the city streets. Or wherever you're driving. I don't know. But the point is, good morning. Welcome back to the podcast.
About taxes.
This is,
finance.
This is a real dry question. And I know this is a real dry question, so I had to dive into this one as well. Basically, this is sort of like a tax on the wealthy. This is sort of a tax on being able to tax our Wall Street, I guess, quote unquote, Wall Street of Chicago.
Basically, we have like our own mini Wall Street in the city, and that's basically where everyone goes for, stock exchanges.
Yeah, so this is being able to tax on those exchanges. This was originally proposed by the gubernatorial hopeful, they wrote here, Dan Biss, who was running against Pritzker for the nomination in the primary, lost it, but this was his idea. For governor of Illinois.
For Democratic bid.
So, this is essentially, to me, a similar topic as taxing on the rich, taxing Wall Street executives, taxing the people who are making the money.
Taxing like the companies, like Amazon is getting taxed to nothing this year. They don't have to pay anything.
So
and people who earn at least anything lower than $50,000 are expected to pay significantly more than actually get anything back.
So I'm going to keep this one simple and say I agree almost across the board with a tax on the wealthy. Just you simple,
have money.
Simple way of saying it. Like,
sorry, you can't go on like another yacht trip.
It's because of the fact that you don't tax these things and people are allowed to do them as much as they want, and it's a financial gain for the person doing it. So the idea that you can just do whatever you want because you have a shit ton of money and you just are going to keep all that money and make more money on top of it while other people can't pay for things and we can't afford things for the city and there's not enough revenue coming in because you're just taking all the revenue, just tax them more. So I say yes.
And just remember too, a lot of these people do donate to charity, but a lot of those are written off on their taxes anyway.
Yeah, it's just a tax write-off. It's just a benefit. It's like, sure, but also the idea that
it's good PR.
The idea that we expect people who make a fuck ton of money to just do the right thing with their money as charity or with donations or with foundations or whatever it is like, no, just fucking pay for it. So if we tax the rich and we can pay for health coverage for most of America because we tax the rich at a rate that no one disagrees with, is like, just fucking do it. If you really just want to do this, if you really want to make this thing happen, just fucking do it. Anyway, I don't think that's a too spicy of a take. Question number 7. Do you want the next mayor to support the creation of an income-based city tax either on Chicagoans or commuters? I don't like the way this sounds.
Yeah, I don't like the way this sounds either.
So it's a commuter tax, and this would be my understanding of a tax on, commuting, people who don't live in the city that are coming into the city to, I assume, make money in the city.
I'm already paying $220 a month. Take. fucking Metra in that hardly runs, so I can work and
Yeah.
go to school down here.
So, this is like it's like a link to their radio station, radio thing.
They're
So,
a very reputable station for reporting.
I will leave it in there. This explains. This is actually one of the mayoral candidates, Bill Daley, is saying that we should consider a commuter tax. It doesn't, unfortunately, have enough information in this article. It's all in the radio interview. So, I would not want to go with that. But I would generally believe that we should not be taxing. Like the first question, if we're going to tax anything, it should be people who are commuting by car, not by public transit. And that's for bringing a car into the city and try to reduce the amount of people that are driving on our already congested highways and improving the CTA to allow more riders to be on it, to allow the rides to be smoother and more consistent, more convenient. And yeah, I don't believe a tax on those people. Maybe a tax on cars. Maybe a tax on that. Income-based city tax. I do believe in income-based taxes and reducing it on the people who
make more money. They're going to get
Yes.
taxed more. People who make less money won't get taxed as much because they're not making enough money.
Yes. And if you are on the other side of that, I suggest you read about tax brackets, which I believe would be mostly how people would think of this. Tax brackets do not mean that they're taking 70% of your income. That's not how tax brackets work. That's just how people want you to think that they work because they don't want you to take 70% of their income over a lot of money. Anyway, I generally would probably say no to this overall, I think. I don't think that I'm feeling strongly about it. I do feel there are better ways of making revenue than taxing people who would really feel it.
And people who are, what if they're commuting to the city to, like, go to the museums or for being like a tourist, basically?
I think there's some other options here. I think that there's a bigger picture here. So I would say no on this one. Maybe look at some other options. So I'm going to say no just to put my 2 cents in. But there might be a different way of thinking about it, and I might be able to change my mind on that if I can hear somebody's opinion on it and think differently about it. Question number 8.
All right. Tax hikes are often discussed as a solution to Chicago's underfunded pension crisis. Should the next mayor explore cutting benefits for current and or future workers and retirees in order to lower the city's pensions obligations?
I'm so sorry that I keep giving you all of the boring to read questions.
Well, listen, here's the thing. Should we cut benefits for, like, people on Medicare, basically? Like, people who are older, they've already done their due diligence, and they're expected, to have that money ready for them after the fest for Social Security.
Yeah. And, of course, the issue here is that we can't pay it because we've fucked up the budget and money in other ways.
We have no money here in Illinois. We are flat-ass broke.
Yeah, but the idea that we would then solve that issue by cutting the benefits seems like that doesn't seem right to me. Like, you already were submitting money into something, and then to say after the fact that you're going to cut the benefits in order to pay more people, it's like, but why aren't we looking at the other solutions to income and then fixing the issue with you not budgeting it correctly before we start cutting things for people that have essentially earned what they're supposed to be getting?
And the biggest thing is a lot of these people who get these pensions are government state workers who earn a significant amount of money that they can put away in their own 401k.
Yeah.
And not really have to think about it more often than not.
Yeah. I'm going to say no on this one. I don't believe that regular people that are going to feel the pain from these sort of things deserve to feel the pain the way they do. I believe that there are other ways to solve these issues from people that won't feel much of a hit. And we should not be affecting the lives of regular people, regular ass mofos like you and I that don't deserve it. So it's a no for me, dog. Randy Jackson. Question number 9. Chicago's vehicle ticketing and enforcement system disproportionately affects people of color. Should the next mayor make changes to the system, even if it means less revenue for the city? My answer is yes.
Yes.
Straight up, this is true. Parking tickets, parking attendance, parking violations, and the money that's earned from the revenue of that does disproportionately affect people of color. That is just a straight up fucking fact.
There have been different investigations that have gone on with this, and people who are traditionally more on the south end where there are more POC individuals, they get ticketed much more, and then they can't drive their car. But
Yeah.
for a lot of people, that's their only way of transportation up into the city or out, to the suburbs if that's where they work.
Yeah.
So
And if you can't pay it, then you just keep getting fine on fine on fine on fine, and it just adds up so much for people.
And then eventually maybe you have to go to jail, serve jail time because you can't afford it.
Or you lose your car, which you need to go and make your money that you still need to use to pay the bills before you pay the fine on it. I find that this is it's a method that I think we see everywhere of just trying to keep the poor. It's about how expensive it is to be poor. And I think that if we can make one simple change of just making changes to the system to, even if we lose revenue, because again, we can find other ways to make the fucking revenue, and we can fix where we're spending it, that we don't need to affect communities that would feel the brunt of what this issue is. We can find other ways to fix it. So my answer is unequivocally, yes, we need to fix the system to stop ticketing and causing this vehicle enforcement within minority communities. So answer for me is yes, fix the fucking system. I'm trying to drop more F-bombs in this so it makes it more interesting. It's like, oh man, how aggressive and edgy is this guy reading a questionnaire about Chicago's local elections?
We get it. We get it, you're old.
I'm trying to make it interesting for the listener.
Question number 10.
How am I doing, listener?
Chicago's mayor has the ability to make dozens of appointments to influential public boards and commissions. Do you want the next mayor to commit to making appointments that mirror Chicago's diverse demographics?
I mean, that sounds like a yes, too.
Yeah.
Like, Chicago is a city of a lot of different backgrounds. We are, unfortunately, a very segregated city where we have people that live in their own communities, and it's a way that Chicago was built. It's sort of just in the DNA of how Chicago was created, and that's unfortunate. If you want to learn
about that, you can just Google redlining. There's a lot of really great articles that describe what it means. Yeah,
redlining is actually, it's a very interesting topic that, like, I think that we don't have enough. There's not enough history of that people are aware of that really have affected so many other pieces of the bigger like racism puzzle in America. That like when I saw some videos on it, I read some articles on it, I'm like, holy shit! Like this is like very specifically speaking to our history and why we are in this situation. You're never going to fix that unless you have people of different backgrounds and different demographics in your electorate. Because of the fact that the mayor is making these appointments, it's not a election. The mayor should therefore, I think, be somebody who comes from a different background, who would want to put people in those backgrounds and maybe even put people from, an underheard community within a larger community to be a part of those boards, to say, you need to pay attention to what's happening around you and be a part of this in order to give some more, would it be re-enfranchising? Not de-enfranchising, disenfranchising, but re-enfranchising?
I mean, kind of, yeah. It would be giving them more power.
Yeah. So I would say yes. Like, we should definitely have people of all backgrounds represented in all places that we can. Number 11. The mayor currently appoints the Chicago Public Schools CEO and each member of the school board. Should the next mayor lobby state legislators to pass a law allowing Chicago voters to elect school board members? I don't know a lot about this either.
So for Chicago public schools, there's been a lot of issues with putting funding where it's supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like a few years ago, the Navy Pier Ferris wheel got a whole makeover while Chicago public schools didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are getting shut down because of test scores. So Chicago public schools really have a lot of issues of maintaining whoever is there and also paying their teachers and keeping things kind of in line. I mean, there's a lot of schools that still don't have proper heating or air conditioning around here, and they should, because it's a school that children are going to.
Yep.
So with that in mind, there are people, who could be in control of this board who may have more of an ability outside of whomever the mayor knows. Because as we all know, politics is a you-know-who-you-know type of game.
Yeah.
So it could always be, hey, I'm going to put, my friend over here in control of this because at the end of the day, after we go through this whole corkboard of crazy conspiracy, red string to every different picture on the board, I'm gonna benefit personally from it.
Yeah.
And basically fuck the kids. That's pretty much what they're saying.
I don't know if that's how I'd say it, but
that's kind of what they're saying at the end of the day. I mean, if you really decided to spend millions of dollars to renovate a Ferris wheel that was just fucking fine, instead of providing funding to children, that's basically saying fuck the kids.
I mean, yeah. I know the school system in Chicago is not taking care of the people who need the best Chicago school system. Like, the South Side primarily has had a lot of schools shut down, and then we send more police into the neighborhoods to stop crime. And it's like, well, no one can go to school, no one can learn, no one can get a degree,
right.
no
and
one can get.
The biggest issue too is that like there's magnet schools. So magnet schools are basically like you kind of have to apply to get into them, and not a lot of kids have that benefit. Not a lot of parents can afford that tuition.
Yep.
Or there are alternatives like Catholic. Or Methodist, whatever denomination school, which are equally just as expensive, if not more expensive, because it's a private school. Then you have to pay for school uniforms.
Yep.
Which is also another obstacle to get over. And while there are scholarships that are offered to certain kids, especially kids who are in lower income areas, they cannot be offered scholarships to like schools like the North Side, for instance.
Yeah.
But what is that doing other than teaching them that? Oh, you're the one that made it out. And it's continuing a really negative narrative in the end.
It's not fixing the underlying issues that are causing a lot of problems, I think, in Chicago and probably a lot of the United States. Is like our education system is bullshit, and we should be spending more money and more energy in reforming our school systems overall to be better for the next generation of kids. So I guess in this question, should we lobby state legislators to pass a law allowing Chicago voters to elect school board members? I think that as long as we allow it to be chosen by one person in power, then we will continue to not get our voices heard about what we want in school elections or school boards or how we want things to be run. And voting for one person that then gets to appoint a bunch of other people is always going to be a scary thought when the people could make a rational decision. Now, of course, you have to then put the power back into the people's hands, which is also scary.
Right.
But I do think it would probably be a step in the right direction.
You also have to remember not everyone who's, going to be a mayor has had children recently in school.
Yeah.
So they're not going to understand fully the extent of what current parents are experiencing.
Yeah.
And what students are experiencing. Because, depending on who it is, like, say, Daly, he's older. He probably hasn't had kids in school for the last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So, and the school system has changed drastically in 20 to 30 years.
Yes.
In every which way. So it's really crucial that you have somebody who has either been heavily involved within the school systems currently, or somebody who is currently involved because maybe they have a child in the school system, or they have like a niece or nephew and they know how it works.
Yeah. And the only way I think to really enforce that and make sure that happens is to give power into people's hands. Yes. and elect it. So I am saying yes. I don't know if I could maybe change my mind on that too, but let's, at the very least, I'm going to say yes for now, and we'll move on. Number 12 out of 19. We're almost there.
Oh, man. Should the next mayor support a binding community benefits agreement for the Obama Presidential Center?
I don't know. I mean, I know that there's communities that are arguing against having the Obama Center here. I, for one, do want the center to be here. I would like to have the Obama Presidential Center in Chicago. I think that it's
where he lives.
I think that it's a benefit for Chicago. I think
feel like
that
it's a big tourist benefit. Exactly.
Yeah,
especially
to bring in and to show one of, I think, the better presidents that have ever been, the first African American president in a community that he is from, and a community that him and Michelle Obama are both from. I think that that's important from the optics of it, and I think that's important from the tourism, like you said, benefit. I'm not sure what a binding community benefits agreement is.
I'm not too sure either.
So I'm going to have to click into this and give a little bit of research. Yeah, so it looks like this is just something to ensure that it will happen and that we would move forward with it. There have been some lawsuits to not get rid of the park that it would take place on. I suppose. I just read this one line. The plaintiffs are mostly white and do not live in the communities closest to the site for the presidential center or the south side. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and disagree with this one, say no. Or no, I mean, I am going to support it because the opposition to it seems like it is not realistic. The opposition seems to me to be people that are not aware of the impact that it would have on the south side of Chicago, and just from a just optics standpoint, from the fact that the first African American president, the first African American president of the United States is building his center in the south side of Chicago, which is traditionally a minority impoverished part of Chicago. And that's where he grew up, and that's where he is from, and that's where he wants to put the presidential center, which will bring a lot of tourism to that area. It will bring a lot of support for that communities around it. So I'm going to say yes, because I do think that it should happen, and I think that the mayor would have an ability to make it happen. There you go. That's my answer for it. Question number 13. Do you want the next mayor to support eliminating the single-family home zoning designation, which allows multi-unit homes in parts of the city as a way to reduce housing segregation? Is this something that you know anything about?
I know about this in my hometown, because we've also had this pop up in the last couple of years.
I remember we talked about it a couple of times, yeah.
So the town that I live in is Naperville, and you've probably seen it as being one of the safest places in the nation. Yeah. What also they are known for is having a really high expected income for people who live there. They also have a lot of problems with housing vouchers, which housing vouchers are given to people who are lower income, so they can live in an area mainly for school districts. So during my time in elementary school, middle school, and high school, there was a lot of issues with kids and parents basically saying that their kids lived within the school district by using a relative or family friend's address, and then saying their child lived with them.
Yeah.
So it came to a point where the school districts were going and sending actual in-person detectives to these people's houses to investigate, to prove yes or no.
Yeah.
And it got really messy and it got really bad because there was kids coming, say, from like the south side even, all the way out like 45 to 50 minutes into the suburbs to get a better education.
Gotcha, yeah.
So a lot of this is the same as having accessible housing to those people who may not be able to afford it otherwise. And it could also be accepting housing vouchers, but those are also based on per renter's discretion. So nobody's really required to accept housing vouchers. It's all by their discretion. That's also another issue that's come about because people want to be basically at the end of the day, you know, classist and racist, and they don't want to accept these people who are trying to get into the neighborhood. This is kind of the same thing where they want to have affordable housing, but also put them in neighborhoods that maybe they traditionally would not be seated or be in.
So I'm reading a little bit of this, an article about it, which is a little bit what we were talking about redlining is segregating based on zoning. One of the things here is that in areas where more minorities live, it's zoned for higher population. So that you can have a higher density of people in a overall smaller area. In areas where it's not minorities, then you have a lower density. So it's sort of like how many houses you can build multi-unit homes in the same area, allowing more people to sort of be segregated by skin color or economics or whatever into the same area, and you all just have to stay there. So you're getting more poor people out of wealthier communities. which I generally disagree with.
Yes.
That's what this sounds like. And so just to read the question again, do you want the next mayor to support eliminating the single-family home zoning designation, which disallows multi-unit homes in parts of the city as a way to reduce housing segregation? So I would say yes, to get rid of that, to allow more multi-unit homes to be built in certain parts of the city, likely lower income homes, so that there is less housing segregation in Chicago. I do believe this is a major issue that has plagued the city of Chicago for a long time. So I would say yes, I would like that to no longer continue to happen.
And remember, when you read some of these voter questions, it's okay to kind of read it out loud because that gives you a better understanding and comprehension of it.
There's always ones that are like in the positive, and then the following one is in the negative, and
when there's a double negative in it, you're like,
yeah,
wait a second,
like,
this is gonna trip me up.
Yeah, I feel like a little bit of what this episode is us kind of doing some of the research for you. So I don't care if you necessarily agree with me or disagree with me. I just want to give you like a little bit of the background on the question and then tell you what my thought is on it. I do think that, we have a podcast that talks about politics, and so you're going to attract people that tend to believe in what your politics are. But if you disagree, totally for it, and you can feel differently about your community or where you live in the city or where you live locally, and vote a different way for your community. But I think these are probably things that are affecting most local elections and most areas in the United States and most suburbs of Chicago as well. So I wanted to kind of just like dive in on each of these questions a little bit to give you some background, and hopefully this is doing you the service that I hope it's doing for you, because it's definitely doing the service for me.
Love it. This one should be a pretty quick answer. Should the next mayor force developers of new projects to build affordable housing units and gentrifying communities where longtime residents are being displaced? Yes.
And this is like sort of related to Lincoln Yards, I assume, that they didn't want to build.
It's really related to like the gentrification of areas such as like Logan Square, which is now like a hipster mecca. That's only come about in the last like 7 years, I believe.
Yeah, I'd say
it used to be a little bit more traditionally lower income.
Yeah.
But now a lot of the minority population that primarily live there is being forced out, and they can't afford it.
Yeah.
Same thing with Pilsen. Pilsen's the other biggest areas really fighting gentrification. They're actually having protests and starting conversations because they do not want this to happen to their community, because that has always been, it's a primarily Hispanic population.
Yep.
And they have been super adamant, and they're so willing to fight to keep their area how it is. But it is slowly becoming gentrified because, their area, there's like a music venue, there's Thalia Hall, and then there's a lot of other independent areas that are popping up, and it's attracting the younger hipster crowd.
Younger
and
suburban
it's
kids
starting
moving into the city.
Force out people who have lived there for, decades.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people at that point, they're older. Especially a lot of Mexican American immigrants, they kind of nestled in the southern side of Chicago.
Yep.
Traditionally from anywhere from UIC downward towards like Midway specifically. And to have those areas begin to have gentrification, especially within the city, Midway's a little bit further out south, it's, it's harmful, especially, if that's their last stand.
For, obviously, as a regular-ass white guy, moving to the city when I did, I didn't have a ton of money. So I moved to Logan Square when I first moved to Chicago. Lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in a apartment building, so 3 or 4 apartments in there, and rent was fairly cheap. But that same area has come up quite a bit. There is a really good restaurant like right behind where I lived. That now I live in Wicker Park, and I've lived in Wicker Park for years, and I appreciate that there's a lot of stuff that has come up in Wicker Park over the years. When I first started to come to Chicago, that was where I would go to hang out, and I go to drink at the bars and eat at the restaurants, and I really enjoyed the neighborhood. But even then, that was when the kind of gentrification of Wicker Park had begun. You're already seeing a bunch of new businesses move in, and now it's like new buildings are being built, new apartments are being built, and they are getting very unaffordable for the area. And I think that this question kind of speaks not only just to areas like Pilsen, where it's a primarily it's a minority culture. It's a person of color culture. It's a Mexican culture, or in other areas where it might be more black culture or whatever. There are poor white people that want to live in the city because we have to work in the city. And I'm not calling myself poor by any means, but I would say that, rent is hard to afford for some white kids from the suburbs as well. It's very hard for a college graduate to get a well-paying job to then be able to pay rent in the city where you work. And by pushing even poor white people out, that causes everyone to have to commute into the city to spend.
You want to tax everyone who's commuting into the city.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's like so many roundabout fucking things with these issues that all sort of connect. If it weren't for the fact that I was able to move into Chicago and then work towards getting better jobs, I'd be spending way more on commuting and barely making any money to actually afford to be able to live anywhere. I have to spend all my money on commuting it back and forth every day, or spend hours commuting back and forth every day, and to live in a fucking closet in the city or whatever. To me, this question is to say, you need to build affordable housing units in these neighborhoods where you're trying to move out all of the poor, not necessarily minorities. I'll even take minorities out of this, but you're trying to move out all the poor people that want to live there. Building a nicer neighborhood means people are going to want to live there. It seems only right that you should not be able to just say only the wealthy or only affluent people are allowed to live in these neighborhoods. Wicker Park is definitely getting there. Logan Square will definitely get there. Humboldt Park will get there. Ukrainian Village will get there. And then that's only on the north side. Like the south side has resisted it, I think, quite a bit. Pilsen is coming up. Bridgeport is next to that. And Bridgeport is mostly like warehouses and a work, more of like a work environment. But these are areas in the city of Chicago that will inevitably get gentrified. And the idea that you could say, we're going to tear down the buildings that have been here, build a newer building where we will only allow certain amounts of people to live in it, and it will not be something that the residents of this neighborhood could afford, then I think that you're doing a disservice to the people that are from the neighborhoods. You're not doing a service to the city of Chicago. You're not benefiting the residents that are here. You're trying to attract more wealthy people to move to your area and try to make money off of that. And sorry, but I also agree with taxing the rich. So like, fuck you. You're going to have to live with the poor people that you don't like. You're going to have to live with people that disagree with you, and you're going to have to pay your fair share of you're going to have to pay your fair share in taxes. So I agree that yes, we should be building affordable housing units, not for any other reason than all communities should be able to live anywhere they want. We should have rent that is affordable to all people. People should be paid a living wage that they can afford to live wherever they want to go. There you go.
Spicy take.
I feel like the numbers are with
take,
me.
But it is.
Yeah. So I'm saying yes to that question. Question number 15, should the next mayor commit to building public housing replaceable units and affordable units on vacant CHA land where demolished high-rises once stood? This is specifically about Cabrini Green.
Yep. If you're not aware, Cabrini Green was one of the first basically Section 8 housing projects in Chicago. Section 8 is essentially where people who are very low income and aren't able to afford housing but able to receive Medicare and state assistance are able to get help with housing, but they're traditionally put in very quote-unquote bad areas. Mm-hmm. So it further continues segregation of people in the poverty class and keeping them down within that class and denying them access to other things that people are afforded who aren't traditionally in those housing.
Yeah, and if you say Cabrini Green to pretty much anybody who lives in Chicago, you think of gang activity, you think of drugs, you think of these 3 high rises that just don't go nearby because it's a really dangerous area. They tore them all down. It's now empty land near what is coming up to be a pretty affluent area too.
Yeah, it's a pretty already well-established area.
Yeah.
If you just drive through, you'll drive past Cabrini Green, and it's a huge ghost town surrounded by very nice high-end stores and restaurants.
So should they build public housing replacement units, so Section 8 housing,
essentially,
to replace what was there on that land? And I mean, generally, I agree with yes. There should be housing for people that have been displaced. There should be housing for people who need the support. Again, we should be doing things for the the people who need the most in our society, and people should be paying their fair share, and we should have revenue that should be able to cover this, and we should be having, we should have access to schools and access to education and access to services to get people on their feet and, being able to contribute to the general community around them. So I'm going to go yeah, because I feel like it's just like a step in the whole process.
I also feel, though, at the same time, it's repeating history, because you would put the same area, but also, on the other hand, it is in a very significantly more developed area.
Yeah, the area is very different
be.
than it was when Cabrini Green was there. Which I also am like, I don't think they would have done that if the Cabrini Green still was there. They would have said, we're going to move this somewhere else.
Yeah.
But now it's much nicer. And I know there are still some housing areas over there. I don't know if it's necessarily put them all in one place. I feel like having, this large building where you just sort of like, have a set it and forget it mentality. And you say like, we're just gonna try to segregate it again and put a lot of people of color in one building and just hope that the problem doesn't come out. It's like, no, the problem is not that you have affordable housing and it's all in one area. The problem is that you're using that as an excuse to gentrify a neighborhood. You should be doing it as a service to people that need the support and also building up the community around them. If you build affordable housing for people in an area where there's good schools and you're putting money into the community to benefit them in other ways, I feel like a lot of these issues with the community sort of go away. You fix the problem by solving all of the contributing effects.
Right.
So I say yes as a simple answer to a more complex problem. There should be more housing that's affordable. There should be more public housing, but it's a bigger issue.
It's a big yes.
Yeah, it's a big issue. So the answer for me is yes. There's a couple more questions.
We're getting there.
Yeah, let's just rocket through these so we can get to the actual candidates.
Should the next mayor expand the number of CHA housing vouchers that allows renters to find homes in neighborhoods that aren't racially and economically segregated? So this is what I was talking about earlier. Like in my hometown, I firmly believe in it because there's people who, for example, kids who have CPS schools closed on them, like where are they supposed to go? If their families are able to have these housing vouchers so that they can move to an area that has a school that they can go to, especially ones where they don't have to trek across the city to go to as well, which is, it's dangerous for like a kid to do.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't even let, my siblings when they were 16 years old still out of my sight because I'm scared something's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
So just imagine like a little 10-year-old kid trekking, themselves there and back to school.
Yeah.
Like over a few miles. That's not okay.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy thing to agree with, that, the communities that need the support.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say yes. Keep that as part of the conversation we already had. Number 17, Chicago aldermen enjoy unwritten unilateral power to influence zoning and development decisions in their wards. Do you want the next mayor to work to end this so-called aldermanic prerogative in favor of a holistic approach to citywide development? So this is basically what that Chance the Rapper video was about how aldermen get to make major decisions in their neighborhood. Ed Burke, which we brought up earlier, has been a serious problem in the city of Chicago. He's been an alderman for years. They make it very hard for new people to run for alderman, run against an alderman. The aldermen are basically like politicians getting lobbied by businesses and other developers that want to move into their neighborhood. And they just say, well, cool, they'll pay me a bunch of money. I'm happy to do whatever they want, and I'm an alderman. I can do this because I say so. So yeah, if you watch the Chance the Rapper video about aldermen, then you know that this is we have to do something about this sort of like unfettered ability of aldermen. So the answer is simple, yes. Number 18.
So-called sweepstakes machines function like legal video gambling, but are unregulated. Should the next mayor support a ban on sweepstakes machines in Chicago?
So I looked up this one too because, again, I have no idea what this is talking about. These are not in, I don't think, our neighborhood, like where we would be living. These are in more impoverished neighborhoods in the city. They are essentially video gambling systems. You can find them in gas stations. You can find them in like
Sometimes there's even like little cafes that have them.
So the thing is, as far as I know, this is similar to the casino question where these are unregulated by an independent third party that's making the money off of them. If the city were to put taxes on these or ban them entirely and put in their own system instead, like the casino, then it would be revenue for the city rather than just an independent company taking money from its areas, putting basically an idea that, it's like the lottery, where the lottery preys on people who don't have money, believing that you can very easily, quickly get money from it. It's essentially the same idea. So I do agree with this one. From the small amount of research I did on it, I tend to lean that way.
Okay. Sounds good.
I also tend to believe that, like, if you can just do a little bit of research on a subject and then, like, make a semi-informed decision on it, you're still better off, because there's no way that any single citizen of anywhere can know everything and everything behind it. Your job as a citizen is to vote and to learn a little bit about who you're electing, to then go there and make decisions for you on your behalf. John Oliver did this on the first episode of the new season of Last Week Tonight, where he said, if you have a problem, like you need a plumber, like you hire somebody to do plumbing for you. That's the same job that you're hiring a politician for, is to do the job of making decisions for you and your communities and your cities, to do that job for you. So I don't think you need to be a fucking expert on any of this shit. I don't understand what the fuck a sweepstakes machine is, but I do believe that the politician should be in my line of thinking with it, at least as what I can understand of it, to then go there and make the decision that I would like to see from that job. All right, last question. Question number 19. Chicago has more lead service lines than any big city in the U.S. Should the next mayor use city money to help residents replace lead pipes that carry water to their homes? Fucking yeah, like duh.
There was actually a really good article that was just released. And actually, my school is doing a whole water investigation of people and lead pipe and finding lead in their homes. I mean, we've seen this with Flint, Michigan, and how they still don't have clean water.
Yeah. It's still a huge thing in our dialogue that Flint doesn't have water.
And I think if we look at it, there's been a lot of investigative reporting that has said that there is lead in our water, and it's significant enough to start to have adverse side effects on us.
Yeah.
And while, people make fun, like, oh, yeah, I could just drink the tap water, like, I'm going to turn into a mutant or some, crazy shit. No, it's legitimate. You can develop different, health-related issues. And it's something that needs to be swapped out and changed. It's like you don't have lead paint in your house anymore because you'll get sick. It's the same thing.
There's a lot of history about lead and all this shit, but I think that's a pretty simple fucking answer. Like, fix the pipes, get rid of lead. We've put this off because they tried to sweep it under the rug, and it's just fix it. Those are the questions. Now we get to the results, and it puts me as a 95% match.
Ooh.
This is actually different than the last time I did it. 95% match to Gary McCarthy, a man whose name I did not see anywhere. 95% match. We only answered one question differently.
Which was
the first one about the taxing rideshare. A lot of these guys want to tax the rideshares, and I kind of feel strongly about that. To get the revenue for CTA improvements, I do feel strongly against taxing or raising fees or trying to put a cap on rideshares. I disagree with that. But most people are in favor of that, and I'm not going to make that my single issue, because there are there's much more important issues in this as well that I'm like, I can't ignore these other things.
I feel like this is an election, though, for most people, that this could be a single issue voting platform for a lot of people.
I agree. I mean, just to be, if you don't know, I'll just make the point here that Gary McCarthy is a white man with a mustache, which I can appreciate.
With a mustache.
There are a lot of people of color who are running. Susanna Mendoza, Amara Annette, I'm going to pronounce that name wrong, sorry. Lori Lightfoot, Tony Prenkwinkle, Willie Wilson. There's a lot of people of color that are running. I think it's worth to you put people in office that you want to do things for the communities that they come from. It is hard to expect that somebody from a certain community is going to do something for another community. It's just, I think that's just fair assumption, and not to say that that's how it's going to be. You should definitely hire people around you that are from different communities to get a better sense of what you need to do in your position for those communities. I think that I would probably end up voting for somebody else because of that. I would rather vote for somebody from a community that needs the support more than somebody from my own community. Although we agree on a lot of the similar things, I'll agree on this. I will do the research on Gary McCarthy before I go into voting, before I go into the actual voting booth. I plan to do early voting at some point before.
Yeah, don't get stuck like a lot of people did in the last election cycle, where people were waiting 4 hours in line on election day. Try to early vote if you're able to. It makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot of good things about Lori Lightfoot. I've seen a lot of people that I know personally saying good things about Lori Lightfoot. I'm going to do some more research before I go and vote, but just as a thing there, I feel pretty okay with Lori Lightfoot as well as a candidate as far as what I know now, although we only got a 74% match.
Ooh.
So
well,
my
what does
OkCupid score is pretty low.
with?
The CTA thing, she believes to hire more police detectives to reduce violence in the homicide rate. She did not answer the taxing on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or the cutting the benefits for pensions to fund the pensions. So there's just a couple like didn't answer things in there that I said yes on. Didn't answer about the Obama Presidential Center. Everything else we actually agreed on. It was only the fact that she didn't say yes or no to some of them that I did answer, so that probably took it away from there. But again, the only things that we really disagreed on that she did answer were the taxes on the ride shares and the police detectives one. So not too far off. I'll do some more research in the next couple of days before I go early vote, basically.
And if you're looking for more information, there's this really great independent site created by a bunch of independent news reporting agencies around here in Chicago called Chi.Vote. And it actually has a really great breakdown list of everybody who's running for mayor, treasurer, and also breaks down the aldermen.
Yeah, which
as
is important.
well. And this is all independent media, so there's no big media advertising influences on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very straightforward, and it's all objective, non-biased, straight to the point. It links to their websites and lists their education and experience and background history as well.
Definitely. So this is a long episode. We're just talking about mayor, and we've already gone over an hour and a half, so I don't want to keep us going too long. I do want to say a Chicago politician I've been following for a while who made a mayoral or a gubernatorial bid, didn't even get to the primary. Amaya Pawar is a politician I've been following who is now running for treasurer. He's very progressive. He's very much like I guess AOC type. Now we can say that because AOC is so...
she's so prominent.
Yeah. He's much more of an AOC type. He's very progressive in his ideas for what he wants to do as a treasurer. And because we talk so much about revenue, so much about bringing money into the city, I only think it's fair to then elect somebody who's going to be in charge of the wallet of the city. I have very much appreciated what Amaya Pawar has stood for. He is from nearby my hometown of Des Plaines, and he also is Indian. So he's, I try not to vote for white people in 2019.
Getting wild.
Try not to vote for white men in 2019 or 2020. So, there's that. That's where I stand as far as treasurer goes. You can agree or disagree. I would like to have somebody progressive who's thinking about where our money's going as in charge of that. He's been endorsed by a lot of the major Chicago publications, so there's that as well. Alderman is the thing that's like really tough because there's a lot of people running for alderman, and I'll link the Chance the Rapper video so you can get a better idea of how alderman is a position that works. Just vote against Ed Burke just in any way you can.
There's literally no Ed Burke anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, he's literally just awful. That's it.
And I I will be voting for Joe Moreno, who is the alderman over like Wicker Park and Logan Square area. If you, just to give you an idea, so Double Door was a venue.
Rip.
Yeah, Double Door was a venue in Wicker Park that closed. There was a lot of arguments from the neighborhood about it, but the owners still decided to sell, and now they're building a Yeti,
Yeti store.
cooler store.
They are bringing Double Door back, but to Uptown area,
Yes.
which is is further to the east side.
Yes.
Northeast side of the city from where we are in Wicker Park.
So when those fights were happening, Joe Moreno was one of the people that was out there on the side of trying to keep it and arguing for the neighborhood, arguing that it's a local venue, it's a small independent venue. We need to keep those. It keeps the culture of our area alive. And of course, didn't win. But I appreciate that there's somebody out there who is in charge of my neighborhood, saying that he wants to keep those sort of things around, keep the culture, keep the attitude. He was also, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be totally off base with this, but I'm just going to say it wildly with no evidence and not going to look it up while we're on this recording, that he was the one that was kicked out of his offices because he argued with that landlord, and I believe it's the same landlord of Double Door. And he has bought a number of buildings in Chicago, and especially in the Logan Square area, and owns them just to push out people he doesn't want in there and make more money off of them. So he's been buying up a bunch of buildings.
If that's true, I love how petty it is, because it's like
he got
it's good
real petty with
I
him.
love it.
And so he kicked him out of his offices, and he had to go find a new place. But it's like, this is a landlord that's basically just buying up this neighborhood and selling it to the highest bidder. And this is something that a lot of other aldermen are kind of okay with, and aldermen that own some of the, or not own, but basically think that they own. I realize that quotation marks don't really work on a podcast recording. That sort of think that they own these areas and can just do it with them what they want, and it benefits themselves. It doesn't benefit the communities that live there. So definitely pay attention to aldermen. It's not something that should go ignored. People have ignored it, and that's where we get these issues. If you're complaining about things not being done in your neighborhood, if you're complaining about potholes in the road, if you're complaining about congestion at traffic lights, if you're complaining about all of the good restaurants closing, if you're complaining about how there's no local venues anymore, like, these are the people that are going to be there to change to change that from happening, or attract new things from coming in. Like, Double Door had to go somewhere, and they built it somewhere else. And the aldermen are the people that are going to be doing something about that.
Especially like in Logan Square, they have a lot of churches being converted into really expensive apartments.
Yep.
And I feel like that's desecrating holy. Sanctuaries.
I don't give a shit about that, but I do give a shit about
I know you don't personally give a shit about that. But when I see
housing.
like an offering altar table as your new kitchen island,
I'm into it.
I feel like that's a little bit sacrilegious to an
I'm
extent.
into it.
I know a lot of people are not super religious who probably listen to this podcast.
I mean, I don't know, but I personally am not, so I am only mad about putting up expensive housing, this like fully renovated new housing in an area that generally can't afford it. Seems a little.
These are housing units that are like, it's like $2,000 for like a 1-bed, 1-bath.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Which for Logan Square area it's ridiculous.
It's a lot. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up because it's a long episode. Thank you if you listened all the way through to get an idea of the issues that are happening in Chicago and what you should be thinking of when you go to the polls. And go to the fucking polls, you turds. Yeah. So I hope that was in some way interesting. And we're probably just like you. We don't find this shit terribly interesting, and we don't find this to be very exciting to talk about, but that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, was to bring attention to the things that people aren't paying attention to. And if we didn't do this, it wouldn't be standing up with our credo, with the reason that we started this thing, with the reason that we want to be talking in anyone's ears.
We have the privilege to be able to do this, so
Yeah.
we should take advantage of that privilege and use it for a good message going forward.
Agreed. Overall, just go to the polls, vote, do something with your ability to go to the poll, like do something with your right to vote. Yeah. So let's wrap this up. Thank you for listening. From all of us at the Emo Social Club podcast, I'm Brian.
I'm Lizzie.
And goodbye.